In this video, you'll build the Robinhood Web 3.0 dApp with Next.js and React. I'm going to show you how to create your own smart contract with Solidity. We'll then use Zeppelin to ensure that your coins are actually compliant with ERC20 standard. We'll even build a DEX, or a decentralized exchange that lets you actually trade tokens within your own app. You'll use Hardhat to actually compile and deploy your smart contracts. We'll use Moralis to actually authenticate every single user that signs in. We'll also use Moralis to interact with our smart contract. And Moralis is basically a Web3 platform that lets you interface with smart contracts and things like Solidity in a really easy fashion. And pretty much with like one line of code, you could have a bunch of your app already working or your authentication already working. We'll use the context API to manage our state inside of React. We'll use Sanity.io as our database to store our users' information and transactions after they've logged in. You'll be able to view and confirm any of these transactions over Etherscan to find out that they are 100% real. Once again, we'll be using the Rpc test network, which is built on the Ethereum blockchain. Last but not least, we'll then deploy this app using Netlify to the interwebs, meaning your friends and your buddies can go and actually go to the website blah.com and actually open an interface with your own dApp. So if you don't know what a dApp is, dApp stands for a decentralized app. And it's another way of saying app, but that's just Web3. So your very own dApp deployed to Netlify with all of this. So I hope you're excited to get started. Right before we get started and start coding, I just want to let you know that we're doing a collab with Buildspace, which is one of the best Web3 education platforms in the world. And you guys are going to be getting an NFT that proves you completed this project, and it's going to be in collab with Buildspace and Clever Programmer, and it's going to look sick. Buildspace also has an incredible community of Web3 developers who you can learn together with in their Discord, and they're very active. Last but not least, Buildspace is also helping new Web3 developers like yourself get matched up with top tier companies like Adidas or Alchemy for premium high contracts. And I'm talking about $10,000 to $20,000 a month contracts, and their vision is amazing. I even met their CEO, Farza, and he's just an incredible, amazing human being. So I'm really excited about this collab. And the best part for you guys, it's completely free. All you have to do is just go down below, click the link in the description. It's going to take you to a landing page, and then it's going to ask you to connect your wallet. And once you connect your wallet, you're good to go. And then when you do this build and you complete it, that wallet will be able to verify you did it. You'll get your own NFT, and you'll get the entire community and everything that goes with it. Okay, so again, it's completely free. Go ahead, sign up for that right now. And with that said, let's just jump right into the video.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Lance here again. Notice anything different? I know, we got the face cam today. I'm not gonna waste any more of your time. Let's get started with the video. The first thing I want you guys to do is to open up your terminal, and let's create our project folder. So our project folder, I'm just gonna write it out here. Let's call it Robinhood Clone Blockchain. Okay, cool. Once you make that folder, cd into it by saying cd folder. And if you didn't know, we're gonna be making this project using Next.js. And to make a Next.js app, all you have to do is write the command npx create next app at latest. Make sure you put space dot, because what this will do is take those starter Next.js files and put it into the folder that we just created. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit enter. Depending on your computer, this may take a couple of minutes to install all of the dependencies that we need. Awesome, so it looks like it's done installing all its dependencies. And since we're here in the terminal, let's set up the rest of our folders that we need. So for now, I wanna set up our studio folder. So I'm gonna say make directory studio. And in this studio folder, this is where we're gonna be setting up our database. And of course, we're gonna be using sanity.io. So make the studio folder, and let's also make our smart-contract folder. If you guys watched our previous video, the Tinder clone, we saw that in that folder, we put all our Solidity contracts. So we're gonna be doing that again today, but way more Solidity. So if you enjoyed that, stay tuned for when I code this up. I'll teach you guys how to deploy those smart contracts onto the blockchain. So I'm making a smart contract folder. What we can do next is hop over to VS Code. I'm gonna click open folder and make sure you open your project. Awesome. And then now by opening this folder, you should see on the left-hand side bar right here, all the Next.js app files along with the two folders that we created. So next we can hop over to your browser and type this in the URL. I'm gonna write sanity.io/cleverprogrammer. Sanity is the database we're going to use. And to get started with Sanity, they were very nice and gave us a couple commands on how to install it. So the first thing you want to do if you don't have Sanity installed is type in npm install-g at sanity/CLI. I already have it installed. So what I'll do is I'll do the next line, which is going to be this right here. So opening your terminal in your VS Code, cd into your studio folder. In your studio folder, like I said, this is where we're going to be setting it up. So type in that command and initialize Sanity by saying sanity init-coupon space clever programmer. By doing that, you get the boosted free plan, which includes all these nice stuff that Sanity provided for us. So thank you, Sanity. What we're gonna do is hit enter. And by hitting enter, it's gonna recognize that you're gonna make a Sanity project. So for the project name, you can keep it the same name as our folder. So I'm gonna say Robinhood Clone Blockchain. Awesome. Next, it's gonna ask you a couple questions. You're gonna be saying yes to most of these. So use the default dataset configuration. Go ahead and say yes. This is the project output. You can go ahead and confirm. And for the select project template, make sure you click clean project with no predefined schemas. I just want to make sure that it's clean and I can just write whatever schemas that I want to make. So it's going to be resolving those dependencies, which also might take a second depending on your computer. All right, so it looks like it's done installing its dependencies and it's initialized. So what you guys can do is hop over to sanity.io, go ahead and log in. When you log in, you should be able to see the project that you just created. And if you put in our coupon code, you're going to notice that it's going to say boosted free. That's how you know it has all the nice stuff. So if you click on it, here's all the information of that Sanity project. So last thing I'll do for now is I'm just gonna cd back into our main folder and go ahead and type in yarn dev or npm run dev if you're using npm. So I'm just gonna hit enter. This is how we're gonna run our Next.js app. And usually it's gonna be on localhost 3000. So go ahead and type that into your command line or just control click. And when it's done compiling, we should see our Next.js app. And there we go. There's our Next.js app. And of course, we can't forget that we're gonna be using Moralis to help build out our app. First thing you want to do to start using Moralis is to head over to this website, t.moralis.io/clever. Once you're there, you'll be greeted with this amazing screen. Go ahead and sign up to get started. And I'm just going to log in. Awesome. And once you've logged in, you should see a page similar to this. And if you're watching this and you're not sure what Moralis, it's actually one of the leading web development platforms that helps developers create decentralized apps really quickly and easily. What does that mean? If you're going to go about this like a traditional way of making a decentralized app, you'll probably connect to some sort of RPC node and create infrastructure around it, meaning you'd have to write your own APIs, you'd have to set up your own queries for the user's transactions, for example. And depending on how much experience you have, that might take you a long time. You're essentially just reinventing a wheel that's already there. With Moralis, it simplifies that process and gives us the tools to set up all those things easily. If you guys are familiar with Firebase, think of Moralis as the Firebase for crypto, right? So how can I get started? The first thing that you're gonna probably wanna do is create a server. So to create a server, there's this nice little button right here. Click that, and depending on whether you're coding on the mainnet or the testnet or a local dev chain server, go ahead and click that option. For this project specifically, I'm gonna click testnet server. And then here you can write out the name of your instance. I'll just call it test app for demo purposes. Select the region that's most relevant to you. Mine's New York. And you're gonna see a couple different chains here. Reason for that is because Moralis is actually cross-chain, right? A good way to explain it, Ivan himself said this, is think of Moralis like a Windows computer that you buy. It runs on the Windows operating system. And let's say a new printer comes out. You're not worried that your computer can't use that specific printer that's not compatible, right? No matter what PC you buy, the printer will still work. Same thing with Moralis. No matter what chain you're working on, Moralis should be working. That's their vision and their goal. And here are the couple things they have set up right now. So we're gonna be using the Rinkeby testnet. So let's click on that. And there you go, we have a server of that. And then you'll see your server that you created right here. You can click view details and any relevant information you need, especially if you're gonna use Moralis, you're gonna have to put like a little provider around it. You're gonna need to pass in the server URL and the app ID. You'll find it right here. Cool. And speaking of the RPC nodes, there's a little section right here on the sidebar that Moralis has called Speedy Nodes. And depending on what network you need to connect to, you can use this as the RPC URL. So here you go, there's the one for Rinkeby. Awesome. All right, coming back to the servers, I'm going to take a look at the server that I made previously, Robinhood Clone Blockchain. And if you click on the dropdown, you can click this dashboard menu and look at that, right? So the moment you set up your server and somebody logs in, for example, somebody logged into our app, we're going to have the ETH address stored onto the Moralis database. And the best part of that database is that we can use that and query it within our own app. So you have access to all the users and their contract addresses, right? You can have access to their balance, right? We can use Moralis to authenticate a user. So you can see from my project that I was building, we have 3 users registered with it, and all of this is accessible. And if you're wondering how we can use it for your apps, we're going to demo some of their features today. And Moralis themselves also have amazing documentation on how to do different things, as well as a YouTube channel that also talks about this more in depth. But if you look at for an example, here's how to integrate Moralis with MetaMask. All you have to do is call the authenticate function, and that's it. That's all you have to write, right? Isn't that insane? So Moralis also has a database that you can use, and it just essentially makes the user experience and the developer experience a lot more simpler and easier, so that we can just focus on making our apps the best. So sounds like Moralis can do a lot, but guess what? It can do more. It can also use cloud functions that you can set up with the server. On top of that, Moralis also has plugins, right? If you go to the plugin store, Moralis is working with a bunch of different companies to give you developers even more tools to make your apps even more amazing. For example, there's this 1inch Moralis plugin that basically integrates DeFi/DEX aggregator that 1inch uses to any project. One cool thing that I noticed here too, there's also Pinata IPFS, enables interaction with the API from Pinata. So a bunch of cool things happening at Moralis, and there's more plugins to come. So that's my spiel on it. Let's move on to the next part. In this build, we'll also be deploying the App To Netlify. So to do that, hop over to this link as well. It's going to be ntl.fyi/clever. Hit enter. You're going to be sent to this page. Go ahead and sign up and make an account with Netlify. Okay, I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in. Awesome. And when you log in, you're going to be greeted with this page. And you might be asking, what is Netlify? And if you haven't heard of it, Netlify is a web hosting and automation platform that accelerates development productivity. Or in short, you can take any code that you make, such as this, and host it on a website that's easily shareable and anybody can see your work. They make that process super simple and easy. So to get started deploying your app to Netlify, the first step you're going to have to do is make sure you take your Next.js app and add it to GitHub. All right. Once you've added it to GitHub, go over to sites and click add a new site. And one of the ways Netlify makes this process really easily is that if you already have your project up on GitHub, you can click import an existing project, right? Connect it to GitHub, click your profile or organization. And if I type in Robin for Robinhood, I'll click on this, right? Make sure that this says yarn run build. And all you have to do, guys, is just click deploy site, and it's going to deploy your website for you. And soon there's going to be a link that I can click and see the nice work that I made. And every time you push to this GitHub repo, it's going to redeploy with those updates. So that's amazing. Let's get to coding. Next, let's install Tailwind with Next.js. Luckily, Tailwind made this super nice documentation on how to get Tailwind with Next.js. Okay, so we're going to be using this as a reference, but I'll be walking you guys through it as well. So the first thing you want to is install these 3 things: Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and Auto Prefixer. So make sure you stop your terminal temporarily or open another one so you can install it. So I'm just going to copy this. And if you use npm, type npm install and then the rest of the command. But I'll be using yarn, so I'm going to say yarn add. Okay, so install those 3 things. Once that's installed, go ahead, initialize Tailwind by saying npx tailwind init-p. Okay, and you're going to see that it created a tailwind.config.js. Go ahead and click that file. And what we need to copy is these 2 strings within this array. So you can copy that and go into your array here, enter, paste, and then save. And the last thing is we need these directives to our CSS. We can also just copy this, go into your styles folder, click on globals.css. Here you're going to see some default styling. We don't really need those, so I'm just going to delete that. Paste the directives into that file, and let's hit save. Okay, once that's done, let's run our build process and load up our web page. Hey, there we go. So it looks slightly different. That's because I deleted the styling, but you should know that Tailwind is now installed. In this section, I'm going to be setting up the front end of our Robinhood app. So what we're going to do, hop over to your pages and let's start coding in our index.js. You're going to notice all these default things, and that's actually why we see all of this welcome to Next.js documentation, stuff like that. What we can do is let's clean it up by removing everything. We can also delete all these imports because I'm going to be adding my own. So if you know anything about Tailwind at all, is that we can style our divs by writing in their class name. And we can define those stylings at the top right here. So what I want my first div to be, we can just change this one. I usually do styles.wrapper, okay? And usually how it works is at the top here, you can say something like const styles equals, and then if I put wrapper here, you can now add CSS to it so that you would see that screen. So if I say something like this, I'm setting the width and height and adding some flex properties to it. I'm not going to explain every single CSS I do here because then this video would be 8 hours long. If you do want to learn more about Tailwind CSS, go ahead and type in this Tailwind cheat sheet and you can basically understand what I'm typing in each time. Also, feel free to pause the video if I move too fast, but let's move on. Yeah, so if you go to Tailwind cheat sheet, you should be able to understand how to do different things, like for example, display flex. Instead of, if you wanted to get the flex property, this is how you would write .flex, or you could just write flex. Let's set up our divs and components. Inside this wrapper div, we're actually going to have a header component, and I don't have any of these components set up. So what I like to do is start to wireframe and plan it out in my head or write it down. So for now, we're gonna have a header component here, and since it doesn't exist, leave it commented out, okay? In the next line, we can make another div. Let's give that one a class name of styles.main_container, okay? And then within that div, we're gonna make a couple more. So this one's gonna be called styles.portfolio amount container. This div is gonna be holding the amount of ETH within it. So I'm gonna say div class name, and this one's gonna be the portfolio amount. Because in Robinhood, you're gonna see a nice portfolio, and a lot of this data is gonna be static. All right, the main point of this functionality is to showcase the trading aspect. So that one's gonna be static. Next thing we're gonna do is class name, your portfolio percent. So I'm gonna say styles.portfolio%. And again, start a hard-coded value of 0.0008. And then you can do plus here. A lot of this styling is based off the actual Robinhood. So it's gonna look just like that app. Okay, and then underneath that, I'm making a span, and this span is gonna have a class name as well of styles.past. And then you can put past hours. Closing, opening, closing. Okay, cool. And then from here, I'm just gonna have a regular div, no class name, it's just used as a container. And within that div, we're gonna make another one called class name styles.chart container. So this is gonna be where our chart goes, okay? And like I said, since it's gonna be where our chart goes, I'm gonna have another component in here, which is gonna be portfolio chart. Okay, next, I'm gonna make another div. This div is gonna have a class name of buying power container. So it's gonna be styles.buying power. And just like the name implies, you should be able to see the buying power amount. So inside that div, you can type in the div with the class name of buying power title. So we'll say styles.buying power title. And in that div, you can put the text buying power. Set up another div. This one is gonna be called buying power amount. So you say styles, buying power, and again, put in this text 12 ETH. Yep, and then in the next line, outside of the buying power container, I want a class name of styles. This div is gonna be called notice. This div is gonna have 2 children, and we're gonna call it notice container. Inside notice container though, it's gonna be notice title. And within notice titles, we can put send nice. And in the next line, it's gonna have a sibling, which I'll call the notice message. Okay, and notice message, what it's gonna say is transfer your funds. And then underneath the transfer your funds here, as another sibling, it's gonna be the component where it's gonna have a component called buy tokens. So we're gonna put buy tokens. And this component, it's gonna have the functionality of actually buying tokens and exchanging. And make sure all of these have styles on them. Otherwise, it's gonna say it's not defined. Okay, cool. So it looks like that's fine. So it's closing div, closing. The next thing is we're gonna have a notice component here. So we can type notice. So if you're noticing, funny. So what I'm doing here is just setting up my components so that for later, I can just add that in. It also helps me give an idea of what I wanna put as a component in here. So in this line, in line 39 for me, I'm gonna have another div. Okay, and this div is gonna have styles.writeMain, and within that we're gonna have another div, and inside the writeMain div is gonna have all the items. So I'm gonna say styles.writeMain item, and inside the writeMain item is, you guessed it, the actual item. So I'm gonna say styles.item title, and the title will be cryptocurrencies. Okay, and then what I want to put inside the writeMain item is a React icon. So what we're gonna need to do is actually install React icons. So temporarily, I'm gonna stop right here for a second, and be sure to install React icon. So I'm gonna say yarn add React-icon. And then after that's installed, we can reset our terminal, say yarn dev, head over to the top, and let's import the icons that I want to use, which are just going to be these two: by dots horizontal rounded and the AI outline plus. And like I said, the siblings to the item tile is going to be the React icon. Okay, and then this is the closing div for the right main item. Okay, and I'm just gonna make a comment here is this is where we want to map through our coins. And when I say coins, these are the coins that we currently have, and I wanna be able to see each asset. So map through coins, and for every coin, make an asset component. Okay, that's gonna be my little note for later. So I'm gonna make another comment here, and we'll just have one asset to start with, just to give you guys an idea of what we're doing. So I'm just gonna say asset like there. Cool. And then over here, make another div. Give it the same class name of styles.writeMainItem, class name, item, title. All right, you're gonna notice that's pretty much the same thing. And don't forget to put styles.itemTitle. And the item title of this specific one is gonna be called lists. Okay, and we're gonna include that React icon that I was telling you about. This one is the AI Outline Plus. Awesome. So that should be it for main. Let me just double check my closing divs. I see the problem. I actually forgot one more div, guys. It's actually in between the main container is all this stuff. Inside main container, there should actually be a left one, because we've been making the, forgot to include this. So inside here, I'm gonna say styles.leftMain and hit enter. And you're gonna notice this closing div. All right, so keep track of where that is. We're gonna put that somewhere else. But for now, just to organize ourselves, highlight everything up until the notice and hit tab, because this closing div should actually belong to the left main one. So what I'll do is actually close it right here. So now take out that closing div that I told you to keep track of, and you'll see that the matching closing div for the left container, the left main is right there. Cool. So I'm gonna save that, and now we're actually missing a div for the main container, so that's just gonna go in between here. So this one should line up with notice, and just add another div for the main container, and the main div for this one, gonna go right here. There we go. I'm also gonna indent right main to keep it organized. Nice, there we go, that's more like it. So now everything's good. We just had to add the left main container because we forgot to do that side. Once that's done, let's add all the rest of the styling using Tailwind, and it already has the names, you just have to give styling to the names. For example, this main container, you're gonna give it this CSS. Don't forget to add commas, here we go. Awesome, you can see how each time I add CSS, this is what it's doing. It's reacting to my page. We're gonna give the left main some flex properties, width 3 4/4 quarters, height full, and give it an overflow of scroll. And the portfolio mount container, it's gonna look like, okay? And like I said, feel free to pause the video if you need to get the actual typing. If you wanna learn more about Tailwind CSS, the best way for you to do it is to study it on the cheat sheet. There's no way you can memorize every single property. The only way that you can get better is by just writing your own CSS over. So after that, with that said, I want to be moving a little bit faster. Let me get the rest of the portfolio amounts in here. Okay, cool. You can see this is what it does. Okay, next, the past hour, text gray of 400. The chart container is going to have this text, justify content center, width full, height 1/3, text white. And the buying power container is actually going to have a lot of CSS as well, which is going to look like this. Don't forget to include the quotes and the comma. Okay, looks like we're getting there. So that's the buying power container. Let's start the buying power title and the amount, which is going to be simply just the text to white, the font bolder, and the text to be large. For the buying power amount, the text is also going to be white, the font will be bolder, and the text is going to be extra large. Okay, then we have the notice amount, which is going to have this flex and border and the rest of the CSS. Next is the notice container with a flex of 1. Then we have the notice title with the gray text white with the font bold. So there's notice TSTA. Okay, and let's do the right main next, which is going to have all of this. There's a CSS for the right main and the right main item. And 2 more, guys. It's going to be the item, title, and the more options. And that should be all the CSS for the index. If you're wondering why it looks like this, that's because remember in our global CSS, we deleted all the starter files. We actually have some styling that we want to include, which is going to be all of this. So take a moment to take a look. HTML, padding 0, margin 0. This is the font family. The main thing is the background color black. And let's just hit save. There we go. So now it's looking a lot more like Robinhood. If I make this just a little bit wider, there we go. Okay, it's a start. So let's build on from here. All right, so in this section, we're gonna be working on the header component. If you remember anything about Robinhood, there's a couple things that go at the top here, along with a login or logout button that you should see. So to get started working on that, let's remember where our header component is. All right, so going back into the index.js, if we look, scroll down with all our CSS and HTML, if you look over here, for me, line 34, this is where our header component is gonna go, which makes sense. It's gonna go above our main container, which is all of this. So what we need to do is over here, let's create a folder called components. So not in styles, in our main folder, let's make a folder called component, okay? And inside that folder is obviously where all our components go. So inside our components folder, I'm gonna make a header.js. Cool. So in that header.js, let's set up our component. And once you make your component, we can actually import that in our index. So what I'm gonna do is comment this out. And at the top here, I'm gonna put it above icons. I'm gonna say components and say import header from components. And you should see it, it's gonna be somewhere up here, but because the text is black, it's not gonna show up. All right, there it is. If I highlight, you can see the header right there. Awesome. It's gonna look a lot better when we style it, so let's get working on it. So head over to your header.js. Next thing you wanna do is import these two things right here for now, right? Which is gonna be import image from next image and the React icon that I told you to download. So hit save and let's work on some divs. So for this main div, I'm just gonna format it real quick and let's change the name. I'm gonna call this div class name and this one's gonna be called container. And again, if we're using Tailwind, we have to say styles.container. And then within that, we're gonna make another div. This one's gonna be class name left header. So I'm gonna say styles.left, okay? Inside is where the image goes, but right now we haven't fully set that up yet. That's where the image is gonna go. And you're gonna see styles not defined if you save because we haven't made their styles object. After the left header, we're gonna make another div here. And this one will be styles.wrapper. A styles.search wrapper, okay? Inside that div will be something called styles.search input container. Input, okay? And then within that very div, I'm gonna have a React icon of AI outlines with this class name. And then we'll have another one. It's gonna have a sibling of styles search input wrapper. All right, so we have a search input container, and you guessed it, inside that container, inside that wrapper will be the input, which for now I can put a placeholder of search ... and I can just extend my code just a little bit, search ... and let's include a class name for him, which will be styles.search input. Awesome. And you can actually make input self-closing. I'm gonna do / closing. Okay, cool. So that's it for the input wrapper. All right, so then here in line 19 for me, I'm gonna make another one. This one will be styles, and styles.header is gonna contain everything on the right side, which would be like where the text that says rewards, cash, I believe portfolio message, and as well as the login, logout button. All right, so we're gonna make 4 divs, each with the class name of styles.something. What I'll do is just copy that, boom, that's 4. This one's gonna be the same one. They're actually all gonna be the same. I should have done it that way. Menu item, styles.menu item, styles.menu item, and just one more menu, okay? And like I mentioned before, this one's gonna be rewards. We got the portfolio in the house. We got cash, money, just cash, and then just messages. Oops, messages, okay? Cool, and then it has one more sibling actually. And like I said, this is where the login, log out button goes. And what we'll have here is some conditional rendering. All right, so I'm gonna type it up and I'll explain it in a second, okay? So what I did, I just inserted this div called another menu item, and it's gonna have an on click of connect wallet. Obviously we don't have that function connect wallet just yet, but just know that if I press login, that's when we should connect our MetaMask into our app. All right, so let me just play with that for a second, hit save. And we need to create our styles object. So at the top here, So at the top here in line 4 for me, I'm just gonna hit enter a few times and let's make our styles object for Tailwind. Let's start off with the CSS for our container, which is gonna have a flex with screen, and that's your height with a black background. Awesome. I'm gonna be moving a little quick with the CSS like I mentioned previously. That's gonna be the left header with the flex of 1, logo, which will have an object cover and a cursor pointer. Now let's get all the search stuff out the way and all the search stuff, And now let's get the search stuff out of the way. So if I hit paste here, you can see this is all the search wrapper CSS that's included. This is the input container. You can't see, it's gonna have a text white, item center, flex 1, ML64, border gray 400, MR64. This is the hover CSS when I hover over it. And this is the timing of that hover, and give it a rounded over there. Cool. Then we have just the search icon, which is pretty simple. Just make it gray, and the wrapper also gray with this with width. Search input, it's gonna have a background that is transparent with no outline and the full width. All right, last thing, it's gonna be the right header and the menu item. Okay, there we go. And if we look, it's looking a lot better. And we can also see that the login is also there too, okay? And like I said, we wanna make it so that, and to talk about what I was saying earlier, when I press login, think about what should happen. I should log in with MetaMask, and once I do log in, should it still say login? No, it should say log out, and if it's cool, we could show our information on the side, just to indicate that we signed in. So what I want to do there to set it up is actually, I want to make some space here just to separate it for you guys. All right, let's do some conditional rendering. I want to have something called is authenticated, right? If is authenticated is true, so is authenticated, and I said if it's true, then I can load all this CSS here, which I'm gonna put it like this, okay? Then we're gonna have another one, is authenticated is not true, right? If it's a falsy value, then what should we load? Should we load the login button or the logout button? That's right, the login. All right, so then I'm gonna add the login back in, and then I can move this extra one right here. I'm just gonna format this, make it look a little bit pretty, put these together, hit save, awesome. And then we're gonna get error because there's no such thing as is authenticated. So for now, let's just make it static here and say const is authenticated equals false. All right, and when I say it's false, what should load? The login, because we're not logged in. So if I made that bigger, there we go. Now look what happens if I say true. I get the formatted account is not defined, right? Because that's also define our formatted account for now to make it static. Const formatted account, and that's gonna be your MetaMask. All right, so I'm just gonna log in real quick, click copy, and I can just probably put this in there and hit save. All right, and there it is. It's super long because that's how long the wallet address is. When we say formatted account, we're probably gonna do something to give it just a little bit more of a nicer readability, which is probably something similar to this. And there you go. So when we log in, we should see the logout button and our account. And if authenticated is false, right, we should see login and we shouldn't be able to see our information. Okay, cool. So this is stuff we need to change later. So if I make a note, make dynamic, awesome. So the only thing we're missing is we should have actually a little logo here. And to do that, you're gonna need some assets. So the next thing we have to do is let's get our image up and running. And what I'm gonna do is utilize my assets folder, right? So the only thing I have in my assets folder is just this logo that I pulled from Robinhood. So all you need to do is just search up the Robinhood logo and just insert that logo into our app. So I have it in here under my assets folder. And again, if you want to use images in Next.js, you have to make sure to import image from next image, right? The next step would be to actually just import the logo, right, from that same spot. So I'm gonna say import logo from, and then the path of your assets folder, which is gonna be .assets/logo. Yeah, cool. So now it's imported, and to use it is to comment out in this area, right, in line 30 for me. I'm just gonna say image, self-closing, give it a source, and we can give the source the same name as the import of the. And the last thing I'm gonna here is you can actually define the width and height of the image inline, which I'll just say 100, and also the width will be the same 100. And this also has a class name styles.logo. Okay, I'll go ahead and save. And then if we open our app, it should look like so. Amazing. There it is. It should be good to go. And that's going to be the front end for the header. We're going to be hopping back and forth between the header and the index as we go, especially after we set up context. So let's work on the next thing. Okay, so now that we have that done, hop over to your index.js and let's look at the next component we have to make. So there is our portfolio chart. The next component that we have to make is the buy tokens component. So this component right here is going to be the functionality or what token I want to buy and exchange for. So it's going to be the same process as we did with the last two, which is to go to your components folder and literally make that buy tokens.js. Buy tokens.js, set up your component, hit save, and now we can import said component. So I'm going to uncomment, and this is how you make a component. So we can come up to the top here. Be sure to organize it. So I'm going to move this import here, and I'm going to say import buy tokens from this path. Okay, cool. All right, and if I highlight this, we can actually see the buy tokens right here. It's not visible because the default color of this is black, but once we add styling, we should be able to see it here. So under transfer your funds, we should see some options, and we can decide what we want. So let's get started. I'm gonna mix it up this time. Let's actually make our styles object first. So I'm gonna do styles equals like, okay, and we're gonna have a class, a div called input amount, and it's just gonna have this kind of styling. So I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so you can see. Hit Alt-T. How's that? So this is the styling we're gonna put for input amount. Oops. Okay, there you go. So that's the styling for input amount. You're gonna include all. The next thing you wanna do is the form container that we're gonna have. The CSS for this is pretty simple. It's just gonna have a flex of item center. Next is gonna be a div called select, which is just gonna have this. And lastly, there's gonna be something called options, which is gonna have pretty similar CSS as well. Okay, now that our CSS is done, once I set up the divs, they'll already be styled. So now let's set up the divs. Okay, let me just clean up this line right here. And the main div that we actually want to put is going to be a form. And in this form, we can do a class name, and we can call it styles.form container. All right, so we made that styling over here. We're now using that and giving that style over to form container. Now we can insert a div within that form again. And now after you do that, we can insert a div in that form. This one isn't gonna have a specific div name. It's gonna have just straight up CSS from Tailwind. And this div will have this styling. Height full, width full, flex column, and item center. Next, we're gonna have a select here with the class name styles.select. All right, so that means it's gonna take up all of this styling that we set up, okay? And we're gonna come back to select, but this will be it for now. So opening up select, inside of it, we're gonna have some options. In options, this is where you can decide what kinds of tokens do you want to trade. And of course, they're all gonna have a all have styles.options for the class name. So depending on how many options you want, you can make a bunch of these. So I'm about to make 4, 3, okay? And here we can actually define our options. So let's say we could have, for example, Bitcoin. Let me try that again. So for this part, we can actually define our options. So I'll say BTC for Bitcoin. I'll say for Ethereum, we can have some Sol for Solana, and we can have some USDC. One thing to note is that we're gonna be building this using Solidity, which runs on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's not gonna be the actual tokens, but we can simulate an exchange. So instead of changing these actual coins, we're gonna have tokens with the same name. So keep that in mind when we're doing that. And just to finish this up, give it a value equals of the same name. So these all should have value, which should just be the same. BTC and USD. After the closing div of select, we'll have an input right here. And input can actually be a self-closing tag, meaning we can just add a / here. But in this input, I wanna give it a couple things. So I'm just gonna give it a placeholder amount. This is the amount that you want to exchange. And since it's gonna have a couple of things, I'm just gonna make it look nicer like this. And it's gonna have a class name of styles.input type equals text. And like I said, we're gonna be coming back to this section, but that's gonna be it for now. After that, we can just have a button here, the class name styles.notice CTA, which we're not gonna actually have anywhere, but it'll make sense in a second. Type equals submit. And eventually we want to add an on click in here, right? So I'll just set it up. And the idea is once we click the button, we're gonna mint those tokens as we send ETH. So it's like we're purchasing them. So we don't have this mint function. Just yet. So I'm just gonna comment it out for later. And the last thing we need to, and before I continue on, all of this should go inside button. So let me just clean it up. And inside that button cool. I'm just gonna clean it up like that. We'll leave the on-click for later actually. And in this button, it should just say send. And it's not gonna, and also it's gonna think these are undefined. So we can actually delete these for now. So I'm gonna delete the values because they don't have any meaning to them just yet. So go ahead and delete those values, hit save. And this is what you should have. Look at that. Nice little chart right here, BTC. And what we're gonna see is the different options once we have the value. But if you look for now, it's like this. Right, you can see BTC, ETH, Sol, and you can also input the amount that you want. So at the moment, there is no functionality, but we'll work on that. Cool. So for now, that's the buy tokens component. Okay, and that is the buy tokens component. If you notice, I'm not seeing the correct styling. That's because these all need to be wrapped in curly brackets. Yep, so wrap them in curly brackets, but also take out the quotes and they should be working just fine. Okay, so I'm just gonna clean this up. If I hit save now, there we go. That's more like it. So there we have it. That is the buy tokens component, the front end part of it. That is the buy tokens component. So pretty soon we're going to be working on the functionality of all of this. So I can switch to ETH, Solana, USDC. You can put the amount that you want. And there you go. That is the buy tokens component. And there we go. All right, so we're almost done coding up the front end. We only have a couple more components to go. So going to index, we're gonna see that the Notice.js is gonna be the next component we'll make. So same process, go to your components folder, type in notice.js, set up your component. Next, you wanna import that same component at the top here. So I'll say import notice from components. And if you hit save, you're not gonna see anything, but notice should be at the bottom. Hit save, and if you wanna see the notice component, just uncomment. And if we hit save, you're gonna notice the notice. All right, there it is. All right, it looks like that because there's not any styling on it. So let's get started on that. So I'm gonna start with the styling first since there's not a lot of CSS. So I'm just gonna say const styles, and the CSS that's gonna have is gonna be just this. Cool. All right. So it's gonna have a notice with the CSS, the notice container of flex1. The title will have this gray text. Message will be white with a font of bold, and the notice CTA will also be bold with green and a cursor pointer. So if I hit save, it will still look like this because we don't have any of the divs, the styles that we set up. So I'm gonna clean this up just a bit, and I'll say div with the class name of, you guessed it, styles.notice. Saving now. It's gonna make that box, right? Everything we add, because it has the Tailwind already, it'll already have the styling when you save. Okay, so within that div, we have the div with the class name of styles.notice container. And inside of that one, this one's gonna be called styles.notice title, which will just say fund your account. Okay, the sibling to that will be another one called notice styles notice message. The message is going to be this whole sentence, which is just your bank account is ready. Fund your Robinhood account to begin trading. Okay, I'm just going to clean it up a bit. There we go. And then you're going to have a div here that's going to have the class name of the notice CTA. So it's going to say styles.notice, and it's going to just say funds. Cool. There we go. And one thing we could do is actually copy this CSS for our styles in by tokens, because then you can see the nice send button over there. Awesome. So this is looking a lot better. Now let's work on the last component. All right, you guys ready for the last component of the front end? Let's go. So the first thing I'll do is head over to index and notice something, that all of the asset component is living in the right main. What is the right main? That's gonna be all of this stuff. That's just gonna show, let's say I have funds in Bitcoin. It's gonna show a chart with how well Bitcoin is doing. Okay, so what does that tell me? It tells me that we're also gonna chart.js, React chart.js in here as well. So we don't have this component, so let's comment it out, create the component. So assets.js. So save. Once we comment it out, we can import it, import assets from here. And also it's assets with an S. So let me fix that. There we go. And you can see that the assets component is taking up space here. And if you remember the little note, we want to map through our coins, and our coins is going to be all of these guys. And for every asset we have, we're going to have a chart over here. So we're going to start with one static one so you guys get an idea of how it's supposed to look. So let's start creating our assets component. And the first thing we need to do is import that line from React chart.js, as well as the import chart from chart.js auto from portfolio chart. Okay, cool. And again, bringing in the styles, there isn't much more CSS. It's just gonna have all of this. A wrapper CSS like usual. The name is going to be bold. The chart will have a width of 36 and the height will be full, a price, and a percent like, okay. To set up the divs, I'm just gonna do something like this. And this main div here is gonna be our wrapper. So let's set that up. Styles.wrapper. Inside the wrapper is our container. Styles.container. And inside the container, it's gonna be styles.name. And here we want the coins. So if you remember, the coin is supposed to represent whether the component has BTC, ETH, SOL, or USDC. For now, I'm just gonna hard code it. Like I said, I'll just put coin symbol. So we're gonna get errors because it's undefined. Still within the wrapper, but as a sibling to the container, we'll have the chart. So this one's gonna have styles.chart. And in here, this is where the line component. And the line component is gonna work the same way as it does in portfolio chart. So it's gonna have a data value, options, a width of 400. Oops, not a width of 400. Height of 150. There we go. And one more thing, this actually is supposed to have an empty div wrapped in it for some spacing, just to help with the CSS. So it goes closing, opening of the chart, line, closing of the chart, and then the closing of that. And then still in the wrapper, we'll have another one. This one's gonna be the price. So I'm gonna say styles.price with a div, with the price that we pass in, with the class name of the styles.percent. Okay, I'm just gonna clean this up 1 second because this div will also have some inline styling that says the color, some inline styling that says that the color will change from green to this color depending on the price, depending on the value of it. So if that change is less than 0, in the negatives, it should be red, and if it's not, it should be green. So I'm just gonna say coin.change. And then at the end, percent to concatenate a percent to the end of it. Awesome. And if you hit save, you're gonna get an error because this doesn't have any of the coin properties passed into it. Another thing we need to do is set up the line data and the options, just like we did with the chart in portfolio. So to do that, I'm gonna hop all the way over here. And to do that, I'm gonna make some space in between these two lines. And before that, we can destructure it so that when I pass down stuff, it'll be easier. I'll say the coin is this, then the price is gonna be this, and then that's how we're gonna use all of that. All right, cool. So coming into line 16 for me, I wanna set up my line. So I'm gonna say .const data equals an object again with the labels, and the labels is actually just an array with these empty quotes. Okay, the next thing is the data sets, which is an array that has an object. And remember, this is gonna control the styling of my chart. So just to paste that in, looks like that. Awesome. And just making the options, which is gonna be exactly the same as the portfolio chart, which is just options, which is object, plugins, legend, display false. One thing to remember that in the data sentence key, there should be another key within here that's gonna have an array with the different points. Like this one that says 40, that's done because I've said 40 here. And then the last one is done because I said 70 here. So if you want to make different points in the chart, you can hard code that value, or we can actually give it a random number. And we can control the range of that random number. What I'm saying is this is gonna end up being an array filled with random numbers. How could we make that more dynamic? You can run this function that I'm gonna set up right now called random number, okay? And again, this function does not exist yet, so let's create it. So I'm just gonna make a function, which is just gonna look something like this, okay? And let's set up that data array that I want to end up returning. And what I could do is create a simple for loop, right, with that initialize at 0, and when I is less than 9, keep looping. And of course, we're going to increment. What I want to do is let's make a random number. And to get a random number in JavaScript, we can actually use math.random. So this will generate a random number actually between 0 and 1. What does that mean? It could be 0, 0.5, 0.66789. What we can do then is to times 100, right? So we can get a number between 0 and 100, okay? And then what I want to do from there is, remember how I said we could get decimals too? We can remove each decimal by just getting a math.floor. So let's say the answer between 0 to 100 is going to be 7.9999. Math.floor will just make that 7. So no decimals. And what we want to do is for every time in the loop, we want to essentially destructure data and add that random number to it. So how many numbers will we end up with is going to be determined by this condition. So if it's I is less than 9, this loop will run 9 times, and each of those 9 times add a random number to the data array. And once that's done looping, we can return set data. Okay. And again, if I hit save, we're still going to get undefined because we haven't passed down coin or price. We've accepted those props. We've put those props down somewhere here, but we never set it to assets. So what I'll do is hop over to the index and let's hard code a coin. And let's say this is my BTC. And again, that doesn't exist yet, so we'll make it the string. And the price of this BTC, which is not reflective of what it is now, is just gonna 0.89, okay, for example. So let's hit save. Let's also hit save on assets. And we're gonna see set graph color is not defined. Oh, that's right, because we have to also make a function to set the graph depending on if it's the right one. Because if I look in my assets, find set graph color, the background color is gonna depend on the function, right? So we're calling random number to get that value, and we're also calling the graph color. So just to fix that, let's just make that function set graph color equals arrow function, okay? It's gonna work similar to before. We care about the change, and if it's less than 0, we want it to be this color that I have right here. If it's anything else, which means if it's greater than 0, we want to return this color. Hey, so there we go. There's our chart. All right, so if I make this a little bit bigger, you can see our nice chart. And this is supposed to represent Bitcoin. And here are the random numbers that it's generating, right? We have a 46, a 9, an 81, 20. This is just to simulate the fluctuation, the volatility of cryptocurrency, right? And if we had multiple assets, we can make a whole bunch. Let me just showcase what it would look like if I map through 4 coins. So if I do something like this, there's 4, give it different properties just to distinguish them, different prices. Remember what would happen if it's less than 0, like we're in the negatives, right? Let's do a whole 9 for what that's one's booming. And there we go. And there's our nice chart. Cool. Awesome. So it looks like that is the front end. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, we are continuing to work on our back end, and let's go ahead and set up our schemas on Sanity. So to do that, we need to head into our studio folder now and click in the folder that says schemas and click schema.js. Notice how this is the default Schema Js, which gives you some really helpful comments on what you need to do here. What I'm gonna do is clean this up and I'll start explaining what we need to do next. Cool. So to clean up your schema, we can get rid of all those comments. All you need to know is that we need to put whatever schema we create inside this array right here. And if you didn't know, is a schema is just essentially how you want to structure the data you need to store in your database. What does that mean? Going in this schema folder, let's create a file and I'm gonna call it user schema.js. Okay, and this user schema.js, it's gonna look similar like this as a prototype. So I'll walk you guys through. First thing you're gonna do is export const user schema. All right, and this is gonna equal into an object, and this object is going to represent what we want our user to look like. So once you clean out all the comments, your schema.js should look something like this. All you need to know is that we're gonna create a bunch of schema files and we're gonna import them into here in this array. What you need to start thinking is what kind of things do you want to store in your database? So head over to schemas and create new file. I want to say it's user schema.js. Okay. Based off the name, you can assume that we're going to be storing users based on this schema. So what kind of fields and values should we store in the database? So as I'm typing, it's going to make a little bit more sense. So we're going to say export const user schema. Awesome. And you're going to say equals object. And what we're going to do is put a key called name, and we're just going to say users. Then there's something called a key for title, which is going to be something similar, but usually it's followed with a capital. So I'll say capital letter users. And the type of this is going to be a document. If you guys don't know what a document is, it's essentially a lightweight record with fields and values, but you can look at it as an object. So here are the fields, and let's define the fields of it. All right, we can define each key or each field by an object. So this first one, the first field that I care about for a user is going to be that user's address or his wallet address. So we can say name, address, title, wallet address, and remember title should be capital, and I'll always include the type. So the data type of the address is usually going to be in a string, so let's define that here. Okay, moving on. The next thing that I care about in this user is going to be its username. So for name, you can simply put username. For title, we're going to say user space capital name, and for type, it's going to be string. Awesome. Okay, next, every time you make an exchange, that's considered a transaction. So if I'm logged in, we want to be able to save each transaction. Underneath the user, there should also be a reference to any of the transactions that user made. So what we could do here is have a field literally called transactions, and title is going to be capital. Okay, and the type of this is going to be array. So my idea here is every user is going to have an array that contain each transaction that user made. So you can do a comma here and add an of, which also has an array to type reference. Okay, cool. All right, so all I'm doing here is making a user schema.js and having a reference to another file that we're going to create called transactions. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. But before we do that, don't forget to hop back over into here and import the user schema.js. So we're going to import user schema, press tab, and it should look something like that. And don't forget, we need to import it like so. Awesome. So now it's part of our Sanity database. And now let's make the next one. All right, so once you add user schema into here, let's hit save. Now let's move on to the next file. I'm going to say new file. I'm going to call this transaction schema.js. Okay, what we're going to set up here is how do we want to store the transactions that we make, all the exchanges. So similar to what we did before, export const transaction schema. Similar to what we did before, export const transaction schema, and then do something like this. Equals object. Okay, then we're gonna have name will be transactions, title also transactions with a capital T. Oh, make sure that this guy, there we go. And the type is also gonna be a doc. Then we're gonna do fields, and let's define the keys of the transaction, which is gonna be tx hash, which stands for transaction hash, being string. Okay, next is gonna be the from address, who are we getting the money from? And the title is going to say from the wallet. That type is going to be a string. Okay, we also want to store the to address, and the title is going to be to wallet address with the type of string. Next, we'll have the amount of the transaction title with the amount number. Yep, so then we have the amount, and then we also have the timestamp, which is actually going to have a type of date. Cool. So that's everything in the transaction schema. Make sure you have the export const so that we can import it in our schema.js, and it's going to look like this. And you can add that to the concat like so. Okay. And that's it for setting up the schemas. What I'll do right now is make another terminal and cd into your studio. Let's do a Sanity start. What Sanity start does is it's going to set up Sanity, and you're going to be able to see your studio on localhost 3333. And when you go over there, you're going to see the desk. It's going to ask you to log in. And this is the desk where you can see, if I click users, we'll see the list of users. At the moment, there's no documents yet, but if we wanted to, we can actually create one and test it out. That's one thing that's really nice about Sanity, and their studio here is very easy to use. Okay, cool. And with that, Sanity set up. Okay, after we set up our schemas, the next thing we have to do is create a lib folder. So what I want to do is click this. Make sure it's not going into Studio actually. This should actually be at the root of your folder. So I'm gonna write it right here, write the word lib. Inside this lib folder, we're gonna write sanity client.js. The reason we do this is because we have to set up our Sanity client here, and that's gonna help us communicate with our database when we make our API routes. So we're gonna do import Sanity client from @sanity/client. So I'm gonna say import Sanity client from the client, and then we can just do export const client equals Sanity client. It's gonna look like that. And to set it up, put inside an object and write these keys. You're gonna say project ID with the value of your Sanity project ID. So 1 second. So what you want to do here is actually put in your project ID. So if we look in our browser, click on your project. This is what we need to put in here. And you could simply just paste it like so. But best practice is to actually put your project IDs, your API tokens, or anything like that in a .env file. So let me take this opportunity to create that file. So go to the root of your folder. Here we can write, in our env folder, we can write sanity underscore project underscore ID, set it equal to your project ID. So for me, that's gonna be this. And underneath, we also need sanity underscore token. To get the API token, all you need to do is click this API tab, scroll down over here, and click add API token. And you can just do editor, and I just usually just write token here. You can write whatever. Hit save. This long string of text is what we need, and you can hit paste on there. Hit save. The reason why we put it in a .env, because if you put it into your GitHub, people won't have access to your keys and your tokens. So once we have that done, we can actually just do process.env.sanity underscore project ID. All right, make sure it's the same name of what we set up for that environment. You can say the data set is production. API version will be v1. And this token here is going to be API token, which is simply just process.env.sanity underscore. Okay. And then the UCDN will be false. Okay, go ahead and hit save. Now we can start using this client for our API route. So let's go ahead and set that up. You can find the API inside the pages folder. So if you look inside the pages folder, you'll see this API folder. And if you look in the API folder, you'll see a hello.js. We can actually delete the hello.js because this is just the default one from Next. Remove that and let's make our own. So clicking into the app API, we can say new file, and we can say this API route is going to be create user.js. What this does is it's going to let us talk to Sanity and help us create a user and store it on our database. So the first thing you want to do in order to do that would be to import the client from our lib folder. After that, we can make an asynchronous function. After that, we can make an asynchronous function, and each of these will have a try catch. And for the catch, all you have to do is res.stat of 500, which means it's an internal server error if we're in the catch. And what we want to do is send a message like so. Awesome. So that's going to be our catch block. Let's start working on the try block, which is going to say const user doc. Because remember, every time we create a user, we want to post that user doc into our database. So what we need to do is pass in all the correct keys. So the type of document that I want to add is the users, and the ID of that user is we're going to get from the wallet address. So we can say rec.body.wallet address, and the username is going to be unnamed. We can later change this in our desk at localhost 3333. Okay, and the address of this is just going to be rec.body.wallet. Okay, cool. And don't forget at the very bottom here, we want to export default create user. And every time you make a .env file, you have to also reload your project. So I'm just going to cancel my terminal and start it up again. Awesome, it's up and running. We have our lib folder and we started making our API routes. Next thing I want to do is let's set up our context folder. After we finish setting up our Sanity client, let's go ahead and set up our context. If you're not sure what context is, what we're going to do is we're going to utilize the context API from React, which lets us take our functions and our variables and lets us access them anywhere into our app. So the first thing I want to do to set that up is let's create a new folder at the root and we can call it context. Inside that context, make a new file and let's call that Robinhood context. To get started using context, what we need to do is import create context. Okay, and while we're here, we're also going to import useEffect and useState from React. Okay, next thing we'll do is let's actually create our context and store that in a variable called Robinhood context. Next, let's set up our provider, which we can do by saying export const Robinhood provider, and it's going to take in children like so. What I want to do next is let's set up our return. What this is going to return is the Robinhood context dot provider. Okay, and in between the provider, it's going to take in children as well. The important thing here is actually go inside the opening tag of the provider. We're going to add an attribute called value. Whatever we pass into value is going to be global and we can access it anywhere in our app. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be slowly adding things in here as I fill out the context. And when you set up the provider, the next step is head over to your pages folder and then head over to _app.js, and we need to wrap our components with that Robinhood context provider. So what I'll do is I'll set that up right now. Okay, now that I cleaned it up, the first step is to import that Robinhood context provider. Okay, so once I clean it up, the next step is to import the Robinhood provider, and you can say from our context. Okay, now that it's imported, go ahead and wrap your component with the provider. By wrapping the provider around our app, it's going to let those variables we pass into value be global. So the next section, we're going to be working the login and log out functionality. What we're going to use for that is something called Moralis. And if you're not sure what Moralis is, it's a web development platform. Think Firebase for crypto. It's going to allow us to manage our backend and give us tools such as user authentication, which we're going to use now. So to set up Moralis, head over to your context folder and hop over to your browser and go to moralis.io. Right? Cool. And it's going to ask you to sign in. If you haven't already, make an account. And what you want to do is create a new server. Go ahead and click testnets, because if you didn't know, we're going to be working on the testnet because we're going to be working on a testnet so that we don't have to use our real money and our real Ethereum for our project. So I'll go ahead and click Rinkeby, and you can name your server Robinhood clone blockchain, the region, put the region you're from, and again, for the network, you can click Rinkeby. I'm going to go ahead and add instance. There it is. Cool. So Moralis is really cool because you can have a number of plugins to help you with your app. You can also take a look at their awesome dashboard, and they support cloud functions. All we're going to need for later is under view details, we're going to need the URL, the app ID, and the master key. Keep that in mind. But for now, going back to our context, let's go ahead and set up Moralis. Okay. To set up Moralis, we're going to need to do something. We need to add Moralis to our app. So we're going to say yarn add react-moralis space. All right, so we're installing two things, react-moralis and Moralis itself. Okay, once that's done, you can start your server up again. And what we need to do is, in order to use Moralis, is actually import something called useMoralis from React. And now that we imported useMoralis, let's grab a couple of things from useMoralis. Okay, so what we're going to grab from Moralis is authenticate, user, logout, Moralis, and enable Web3. Okay, Moralis has this really cool thing that will already check and listen in the backend if a wallet is connected to the app. So we want to utilize that for our login and log out button. So let's actually make that function. And if you remember, we called it connect wallet. Okay, and in this connect wallet function, we can just utilize authenticate just like that. And then now let's work on sign out, which will just be const sign out equals arrow function. And what we're going to do for sign out is just simply use the logout function from Moralis. Look at that. So Moralis makes it super easy to authenticate a user, which is super nice. And that's all we have to do for that. All right, coming over to line 11 in my app, let's set up a couple use effects. because now we want to check if the user is logged in, because if the user is not logged in, they shouldn't be able to use our app. So to check for that, I want to have a use effect here. In this use effect, all we have to do is write an if statement, and we can just is authenticated. Is authenticated is going to be true or false depending on if the user is logged in. So if the user is authenticated or logged in, we can just get their wallet address. So to do that, I'm going to make a variable called account equals user.get, and you type in ETH address, and that's how we can get their wallet address. We can just store it in the variable here. The next step is let's make a variable called formatted account, and we want to format that account. If you remember what I set up in header, we want to see the O1X ... and then the last few letters of your wallet address, because we don't want the whole thing. We're going to format that account. Okay, then we want to set formatted account, right? So we don't have that state yet, but if you remember, we imported use state. So while we're here, we can actually set up those state variables. So the state variables we're going to select for now, it's just going to be const current account, set current account, and formatted account, and set formatted. So there we go. So now that after we slice this, we can set the formatted account to the format account. Okay, and I don't want to make these the same name. That could get a little confusing. So I'm going to call this one format account, and that's actually what we want to pass in, format. Okay, there you go. That's a lot cleaner. And not only that, we also have to set the current account. All right, so now after we do this, the formatted account will be whatever this is, and the current account will be just account, which is going to have the wallet address. And in the dependency module, all we have to do is authenticated and enable Web3. Awesome. The next thing we want to do is let's have another use effect. But the purpose of this one is if this is the first time that user is logging into our app, we want to create that user in our Sanity Database. So we're going to make use of that API route we set up earlier with create user. So to do so, let's set it up. So if there is no current account, or in other words, if current account does not exist, we can just return. So we're going to make that asynchronous function like so. And all it's going to do is create a variable called response and set that equal to a fetch call of our API route that we set. Okay, and it's going to have a method of post because we're adding a user document to our database. You're going to pass in these headers, and for the body, we just want to pass in the current account as the wallet address so we can store the value in there. Cool. And then lastly, set up your dependency module, and this user effect should run when current account changes. Okay, that seems pretty good for now. And remember the value attribute that I was telling you, let's pass in a couple of things to get this log out and login function working. So we can type in our connect wallet function, our sign out function. Don't forget to put commas. We can pass in current account is authenticated, formatted account, and that should be good for now. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. And you're gonna notice when you've been saving that there's this little error down here. 1 second. Oh, whoops. I'm missing something here. I need to have another closing parenthesis to close off my asynchronous function. There we go. And then in between here, there should actually be data equals await response.json, because I got to make sure to turn this file into a JSON file. There we go. That looks a lot better. So now we shouldn't see a squiggly here, and I hit save. But yeah, as I was saying before, you're going to see a little bit of an error here. That's because just like the provider in our app.js, we need to pass down a Moralis provider. Okay, so it's going to be a similar process. We just have to say import Moralis provider from React-Moralis. Okay, cool. And then I'm just going to indent this because we're going to put provider around this whole thing. Copy it. Okay, amazing. And not only that, we actually have to pass in a couple things in that provider. And remember I told you the details about your Robinhood clone? We're going to use some of that now. So what we want to do is type in server URL and set that equal to your URL. And we also want to pass down app ID, set that equal to your app ID. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, it's compiling and let's go. No more errors. That looks good to me. So now that we set up our provider, let's go ahead and go into our header.js. And I already started, but let's import that use context from React. I already started, but you want to import use context from React so we can utilize the context we just. Another thing that we're going to need to import is let's specifically import Robinhood context from our context folder. And now that we pass those two things underneath the header component, we can say something like const object equals use context hook, pass in Robinhood context, and now whatever we put from value, we can actually just pull it straight from our context here. So what do we want in the header? We want a couple things. So I'm going to start formatting it like so. I'm going to say, get me the connect wallet, the sign out function, the current account state, the is authenticated, and the formatted account. And I didn't see the pop up for current account maybe because we're not going to use later. But let's see if we're going to use that. But these are the things we're probably going to use. So let's take a look. And these are not highlighted because we're actually already using them. If you remember, connect wallet comes from this onClick for the logout, for the login. So that's why. So now these functions in here already exist, right? Even the sign out for the logout already exists. And is authenticated is not grayed out, mostly because we're actually, the reason it didn't give us any errors before is because when I put is authenticated, I had like a static value. But now we don't need that anymore. So we can go ahead and delete this. And if we hit save, should see our app. So let's see what's going on. Do some debugging, black screen. I put S authenticated, my use effect. So let's go back to our context. Let me fix my spelling, guys. You want to put just is. Now that compile. Next up, what's our next error? Oh, can't perform an unmounted component. Hey, there we go. Now we're talking. So now let's just see if the login and logout function works. If I click login, oh, nice. We got the MetaMask in here. And I made several accounts. If you guys remember watching the Tinder clone, I made several accounts. Feel free to choose one of them. I'm going to connect with account 1. Let's hit sign. Hey, okay, look, and there it is. The logout button, the login button is now logout, and this is actually my wallet address. Let me just double check that by clicking. Nice. So we're actually logged in. The next thing I want to check is our Sanity database. So I'm going to go over here and let's just make sure we do Sanity start. Wait, sorry. I'll go into another terminal and let's actually CD into our studio. And then we can do Sanity start again if you haven't done so already. Because if we logged in, and this was my first time logging in, we should be able to see a user. And a user with the username unnamed. Okay? Our studio successfully compiled. All we need to do is go to localhost 333. So I'm going to click that. Let's click on users. No documents of this type. Okay, that's interesting. Let's just double check our client. Yeah, so I refresh the page and it says module not found of Sanity. Let me just install that again and let's see what happens. All right, so that's done installing. Let's open up the localhost 3 again. Let's try this again. Should log out. I gotta make sure my MetaMask is not okay. Disconnect this to double check. Cool, and we're not logged in. I'm gonna hit refresh. And let's try this again. So again, what should happen is if I log in, it should create an account in Sanity. So I'm just check the console. Anything going on? Nope. Okay. We hit login. We have a notification from MetaMask. What account I want to connect to? Let's do the first. Say connect. There's the signature request. Creating user. We will hit the try block, and then it didn't finish sending out a response. So I think the issue is I forgot to put something in here. All right, we need to write an await actually. An await client dot create if not exist. Because Sanity actually has this really cool function that if the user doesn't exist, that's how we can create one. Okay, so let me try that again. Log out, double check by disconnecting our MetaMask wallet. There you go. That's why you always gotta double check your code. If it's not connected, let's hit a refresh. Now let's try this again. Log in, hit next, connect, and this should work. Ooh. Oh, and await isn't allowed in the non-async function. There you go. So let's add the async to this, and that shouldn't be adding a user. Let's hit log out again. Disconnect our MetaMask. Double check. All right, guys. 3rd time's the charm. We got this. I made sure it's asynchronous. We added the await. We're using our client or using the method create if not exist, passing in the user doc. This should work. So log in, connect, creating user. Let me just check my Sanity. Oh, it's there. Let's go. Let me just open this, loading the document. Let's go, it's there. Okay, cool. So we have the wallet address stored. The username is unnamed, and that's exactly what we should be seeing. So now we're able to restore that. So I think the only thing I'm missing is probably because I don't have a res.send. So I'm gonna do a res.send, res.status of 201.send message, and we can say it's a big success. Let's just add that line in there. And let's name this user. Yep, and this isn't gonna mean much, but we can just say lines. Amazing. Okay, cool. Let me say success, spell that right. Cool. And just because I'm excited, I want to try logging in and logging out one more time. This time, let's do account 2. So it's not connected. Let's make this nice and big for the demo. Let's see if account 2 can log in. All right, nice and refreshed. I hit login. This time we'll connect account 2. And what we should see when we log in is this. And since he's never logged in before, this should actually create an account. Hit sign. Head over to here. Oh snap, we got user 2. That's his wallet address, unnamed because that's the default name we put, and we should see that nice over here. Let's go. So now you can log in. You can send this to your friends. They can log in with their MetaMask and it will store that user into the data. And if you look in our console, we used to have the API resolve without sending a response. If we added that line, and now it just says creating user, and that's our console log. Beautiful. So that is the login and logout functionality. All right, in this section, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to create a smart contract. So all we need to do is hop into your terminal and cd to that smart contract folder we just set up. Next, you just have to write a command called npx hardhat. Okay, and if you don't know, Hardhat is an Ethereum development environment which lets us compile our contracts and helps us deploy them into the blockchain. So all you have to do is write this npx hardhat, and you're gonna see this little menu. You can create a basic sample project. Okay, make sure that this is the path, enter, add a git ignore. Then it's gonna tell us to npm install these dependencies. All right, and I'm gonna be using. And I usually use yarn, so I'm just gonna do a yarn add, and we can install all this. -- save dev, we need hardhat, we need atomic labs, waffle, chai, okay, this, and lastly we need ethers. All right, so I'm gonna hit enter, and I'm just gonna give this a couple minutes, and we'll cut back when it's done. Hey, there we go. All right, so it looks like it's done. If you click onto your package.json, you should see all of these files. You should see that, Nomic Labs, we see chai, we see waffles, ethers, and it looks like we're missing one more. Missing one more, we need yarn, hardhat, of course. Yarn, there you go. So that looks a lot better. You might add one more package, but let's move on to the next. So this is all the packages that you need for hardhat. The next thing that's not included with hardhat is going to be something called OpenZeppelin. OpenZeppelin is a library that we can use that helps us standardize our contracts, and it's going to make it a lot easier to build them. So what we need to do is add that as well. And it's just going to be at OpenZeppelin /contracts. So it's going to be OpenZeppelin 2ps /contracts. Awesome. That should be all the dependencies that we should be good to go. All right, cool. So what we can do now is in your smart contracts folder, go into contracts, and you're going to see this greeter.sol. This greeter.sol means Solidity, and this is an example of what a standard contract might look like. All right, we won't need it because we're going to be building our own. So go ahead and click delete. Awesome. And then in case you guys don't have it, be sure you have an extension called Solidity by Juan Blanco, which provides Ethereum Solidity support for Visual Studio Code. So if you get this extension, you hop back over to your contracts and let's click new file. And here we're going to make a contract that's going to exchange our Ethereum for that. For example, if we have something called a btc.sol, that's going to represent us getting Bitcoin tokens for our Ethereum. So one thing to keep in mind, what we're exchanging here isn't actual Bitcoin or Solana. We're going to be working on what's called the test network of Ethereum, and it's called Ruby. And if you didn't know, Solana and Bitcoin are completely different blockchains. But what I want to do is simulate what an exchange would look like, but all on the Rinkeby testnet. So I'm going to call this btc.sol. And just for better naming, I'm just going to make it a capital BTC. There you go. Cool. So I'm going to call this btc. And if you didn't know, in Solidity, we always have to specify the version of Solidity that we're using. And we can just say Pragma Solidity and greater than 0.84. So it's compatible with this version and up, essentially. Oops, hit save. Next thing I want to do is let's import our OpenZeppelin, and we want to import the ERC20 and this contracts accessible ownable.sol, right? Because our contracts are going to be the ERC20 standard, which usually has to do with money and exchanges. All right, so to set up a smart contract, all you have to do is simply write contract, right? Contract, and then the name, which we put as BTC, and then you have to say is ERC20, all right? This just means that this contract is the ERC20 standard that we're getting from OpenZeppelin. If you guys are familiar with class-based components, it's like class Ferrari extends car, right? We're inheriting car class and building on top of it our Ferrari. But this time we're building a BTC contract, which is built on top of the ERC20 standard. Make sense? Cool. So we also want to make an ownable, right? And we can say constructor because we can own this token, and then we can just set it up like this, ERC20. Here we can say quotes the BTC, and what we want it to look like when we own it is BTC like this. Expected string end quotes. There you go. Awesome. Nope, we don't need this space here. You can just do that. That's just setting up our constructor. And now we can actually set up our mint function. What we want to happen is call and run our contract. We want to be able to mint those BTC tokens to the user after sending some. So we can say address to. And another thing about Solidity is that you need to specify the type, right? Not like JavaScript where you can just write let num and it can be a string or a number, right? Here you're specifying the parameters that this parameter is going to be an address type. This amount parameter is going to be an integer that's 256. Okay. Next thing I want to do is make this function public so that we can use it anywhere. so that we can call it, and then we can do underscore mint to NML. Okay, and another thing to note about Solidity is that they should always be having semicolons when you end it. It's a lot more strict. Notice how we have it here and here. All right, that's something we should do. Okay, so after we set up our mint function, we also need to receive. All right, so we're gonna write receive actually. Oops, receive external and payable. Awesome. That's gonna be important for later. There you go. Once that's done, this is the btc.sol, which is essentially just a contract where we can exchange our ETH for, so whatever coins that you wanna exchange or simulate the exchange of, you want to create that contract. So I'm just going to do the same thing, making a new file again, and I'm going to call this one, and I'm going to call this one Dogecoin, that's Sol. And essentially, it's going to be the same thing. So if I paste this, I'm pasting the Bitcoin contract. The only difference that's important is that you have to change this to Dogecoin and the abbreviation to the same abbreviation of what you want, which is going to be cool. So think about what coins do you want to simulate the exchange of, or you could just copy and code along with me. That's Bitcoin, that's Dogecoin. Let's simulate Solana. And just to reiterate, this is not actually Solana. This is going to be a token that represents Solana in our exchange. And again, just going to paste it, change the BTC to Solana, change the abbreviation to, and just now that I'm thinking about it, the BTC.sol should actually be Bitcoin. It should be the name of our token. Okay, cool. Just update it. Okay, cool. We can just do one more smart contract, and this one will be USDC. So I'll make it like this, USDC.sol. Okay, cool. You can hit paste. You can label this as USDC, as USDC. Save. There you go. So we have all 4 smart contracts. These are going to represent tokens that we can exchange with our Ethereum. Now that we're done creating our smart contracts, let's go over to our scripts folder. This is where we can make a script that deploys each contract onto the blockchain. So we have a sample script here. We can go ahead and delete that. We're going to make our own. And in the scripts folder, I'm going to click new file, and I'm going to write deploy.js. Awesome. So now I'm in the deploy.js, and since I'm here, we're going to need a couple of things. So the first thing I want to do in the deploy.js is say const ethers equals require hard hat. Awesome. Once we do const ethers require hard hat, let's go ahead and set up a main function. It's going to be asynchronous. Essentially what we want to do is grab each of our smart contracts and deploy them to the blockchain. So we have to grab each one. So let's start with Dogecoin, for example. So if I say const doge factory equals, and await ethers dot get contract factory, and then you could just say the name of your contract here. So for me, I can say awesome. So that's the name of our contract. I think I wrote it like this actually. Cool. Okay. So let's write const doge factory equals await ethers get contract factory doge. Amazing. So like I said, you want to do that for each one. What you want to do is then say const contract equals await doge factory, the variable we set up, dot deploy. Okay, from here we can just have a console log that says Dogecoin deployed to, and then we could say the address that we have, which is Dogecoin contract. Because once it gets deployed, it's going to point to the address of our contract on the blockchain, and we should be able to console log that and save it because we're going to need it for later. Okay, and like I said, we want to do this for every single contract, so I'm just going to repeat this process 4 times. So I'm just going to copy the Doge factory as an example, and I'm just going to change all the names. So this one can be Bitcoin factory, Bitcoin contract. This one can be the Solana factory, Solana contract, the USDC factory, USDC contract, and you get the idea. So I'm going to go quickly change all the names, hit save, and there you go. It's all set up now. Next thing you want to do is have this async function that it's going to await for the main function to run, and if it's successful, we exit with 0. And if there's an error at all with this main function, we're going to exit with 1. Okay, that looks good so far. You can hit save. So after you finish your deploy script, go ahead and open your browser. And what we want to do is head over to Alchemy. If you don't know what Alchemy is, it essentially gives us developers the tools to communicate to the blockchain. Think of it as an API to make requests for us to do things and interact with the network. So I'm going to head over to Alchemy right now, and you need to make an account and log in. And you see my past projects is over here. We're going to make a new app. So you can name this the same thing, Robinhood Clone Blockchain. Descriptions, you want to make sure that the chain is Ethereum and that the network is going to be Rpc. Like I've mentioned in my past video, we're going to be working on the Rpc net because otherwise we'd be using our real money, our real Ethereum to deploy these contracts. Because every time we deploy the contract, there's something called gas fees, which is something we have to pay to use the blockchain, right? So we want to be using Rpc because we can actually get fake Ethereum. If you want to see how to get fake Ethereum, be sure to watch our video on the Tinder clone where I'll show you guys how to get fake Ethereum. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the app. Awesome. And what we need is to view so we need the API key and the HTTP. Okay. So now that you know what that is, we can actually go to the root of our smart contract folder. Now I want to make a file, and we're going to have a .env here as well. And if we have a .env file here, we need to be able to import it to our config.js here. So I'll talk about that in a moment, but let's just add this dependency, DOTENV, so that we can import environment variables to that config. Awesome. Okay, cool. Now that this is installed, let's work on setting up our config. And you're going to see there's a bunch of starter stuff here. We can actually just delete all of this, keep the top two. All right, and here we're going to import that Alchemy API URL. Okay, so let's set up those variables by going into the .env. Okay, so in your env file, the next thing we have to do is to get the keys. So if you click on the right one, so we did Robinhood up here, you're going to see the API key, the HTTP. Awesome. What we need is the HTTP, the Alchemy API URL. So we're just going to write just that, alchemy _API _URL equals, and then just paste that on there. The next thing you'll need is your wallet private key. So you'll say wallet _private key. Okay, that equals. And then to get your private key, click your MetaMask. Oops, not that. You want to click on these three dots, click on account details, and click export private key. It will then ask you to put in your password. Awesome, and you'll get this little thing, right? Make sure you don't share your private key to anybody else, because then they can steal assets from your account. This is just a burner account, so don't really mind much if you guys do anything with that. And make sure you don't share your private key to anybody else because they can steal your assets, which is why we put it in a .env file, so that when you upload this to GitHub or anywhere else, they can't see it. So go back to your hardhat.config, and what we can do is remember the .nev thing that we installed earlier. I'm not sure if we did this already, but paste that so we can access the .env file. Go to your module.exports, and then you can write a key called networks. Okay, set that to an object. Here, let's define all the networks we're using, which is just Rpc. So I can say Rpc URL, and the URL is going to be alchemy, right? API _URL. That's the variable we set up. Next, we're going to just do an account. It's going to be an array, and this is where you put your wallet. So you can say wallet _private key. Okay, and while we're here, you just want to make sure that everything is correct. So what I'm going to do is double check my contracts, which is going to be btc.sol. And I also took the liberty of deleting the greeter.sol in between. So once you do that, I'll double check that the contract says the right name. Contract BTC is ERC20. Double check with Dogecoin. After you double checked everything, I added this .deployed to make sure each contract gets deployed. I can go down to my terminal now and run this command, npx hardhat run script/deploy.js -network Rpc. All right, what's this going to do is it's going to use hardhat to run our deploy.js script, and if we know that in turn this will run each contract and deploy it to the blockchain. So I'm going to hit enter, and this should work. And if it takes a while, that's probably because it's communicating with the blockchain, because Rpc is just a little slow when it makes transactions. So opening up my MetaMask, this is how much ETH I have currently, and you could probably speed this up for you guys so you don't have to wait as long as me. All right, we got Bitcoin, that's Solana. Come on, one more. Don't fail me now. And we got DC. Let's go. So all of our contracts actually live on the blockchain right now. Isn't that insane? And you could tell because this is the actual contract address, right? We're getting the Bitcoin contract.address. So it's important that you guys actually save all these addresses, because that's what we're going to reference later with our Robinhood app. So what I'm going to do is remember your lib folder. Let's go to your lib folder. There should only be sanity client.js in there. We're going to add a new file, and we're going to call it constants.js. Yep, sounds about right. And what we want to do now is something like this, export const, and then say something doge address. Okay, we're going to save each one into a variable. All right, so write it like that. You can go ahead and copy each one. So this guy is Dogecoin. All right, because we want to reference the right contract with our app. So export const Bitcoin equals that. And I'll just start writing everything out. Export Solana. Okay, cool. Awesome. We're not done just yet. The next thing we want to do is we actually need to get the ABI from each contract. It's going to be important for later. And to find that, open your smart contracts folder, right, go into your artifacts and go into the contracts folder again in that artifacts folder. And if you open up btc.sol, we want to copy each .json into our lib folder. So I'm just going to copy each one. Make sure you get the .json and not the .dbg.json. Get the .json. Okay, and paste it. Cool. So now that you have those four, we don't need the greeter.sol one because that was the default Solidity contract from earlier that I deleted in between. So what I want to do now is go to your constants. We need to actually still get the ABI from that .json. So we could do that by saying doge from ./dogecoin.json, import bitcoin from ./btc.json, and you get the idea. So now that we imported each file, let's extract the ABI from them. So you could say export const doge ABI equals doge, right? That's what the import dot ABI, and that's it. So do that for each one again. So once you have all of that, all you're exporting all the variables, let's move on to the next section. All right, in this section, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to do the swap token functionality and how to save our transactions onto Sanity. So before I do that, I actually wanna take a look at our code and take a step back and fix up a couple things before moving on. Sounds good? Awesome. So hop over with me to swap tokens.js. If you remember earlier, we were using the create user route help with our login and logout functionality. But if you look at this file, the swap tokens.js in your API folder, this controls how we can save a transaction document and store all our transactions. Now, taking a look at it, you might notice that we actually need to make this an arrow function. And if you were getting any errors up until this point, it's probably because we had to finish out our try block. You wanted to say await and then use this nifty little method that Sanity has called client.create if not exists, right? And then you want to pass in our text document. Sanity is super cool because it actually has a method that checks if this document is already being stored, and if it's not being stored already, it's just gonna make it. If it is, it's gonna ignore it. So this is really nice. And then we can also have a res.status, right? 201 send, and what it's gonna send is an object with a message that says success. And just to make sure, I like to have this console log, and we can just say a string, something like swap tokens was a success. Okay, so that make sure you have that. It looks exactly like mine, so there's no errors or anything like that. The next thing I want to do is I want to finish out the context. Okay, so hop over to the Robinhood context with me. And I'm going to make it bigger since this is the main focus at the moment. And the first thing you're going to want to do is import all of our smart contracts and their ABIs. So if you remember, we find these in our lib folder, right? Everything in our constants.js, we're going to need all of this. So make sure it says everything properly, like Doge ABI, Bitcoin ABI, Solana ABI, USDC, and so forth, because that's how you're going to be importing these. Make sense? Cool. So hop over to Robinhood again, set it up, and we can do something like Doge ABI. We can say Bitcoin ABI, Solana ABI, and what else did we have? USDC. Okay. And then after that, just get all the addresses as well since we're here. So Doge address, Bitcoin address, Solana, and USDC. Okay. And this will only work if you have it the same way you're exporting it. So notice how I said Bitcoin ABI instead of BTC ABI. Make sure it matches what you wrote in your constants folder. Okay, and then you can just say from /lib/constants. Cool. So now that's done. Hop over to line 20 to 21 with me, and let's add the rest of our states. So what I'm going to add now is const coin select, and of course set coin select, and we can set the default to Doge. What this is doing, it's just a state variable that I'm using to keep track of what coin am I selecting here. This is represented by coin select. That's why if I click something here, I see set coin select is not awesome. Cool. So that's coin select. Another one that we're gonna have is something I'll call toCoin. Right, I'm gonna make another options menu, which I'll explain in a couple minutes. But just know that this is also gonna keep track of another coin that I'm selecting, and this can be empty. Okay, next we also need to keep track of what our current balance is, and we can set that equal to empty string as well. And last but not least, we also want to keep track of an amount. Set amount equals, cool. That should be all the states that we need. Time to work on the rest of the functions. All right, so that should be all the states for now. Next thing we should do is let's update our use effect. So if you look over here, one thing this should actually be, and then come under the set current account, and let's just make a variable called current balance, okay? And then what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna use Moralis to get our MetaMask's current balance. So we could do that by doing moralis.web3api.account. And then from there, we could do a get native balance. You can see the suggestion right there. Cool. And then we can pass in is an object. It says Rinkeby. Oh, sorry. It should actually be an object that says chain and then specify Rinkeby. And then the address of that account should just be the current account, which should be cool. And that's how we make a call with Moralis to get the MetaMask's current balance. Awesome. All right, cool. And after that, on line 39, we're gonna make another variable called balance to ETH, because when we get our native balance with Moralis, it's gonna be in way. We also gotta convert that back to Ether. So we can do that by saying Moralis.units from way, and then we can target our balance by saying current balance, okay? And after that, we're gonna make a variable called format balance, and that's gonna equal our balance to ETH, and I want to parse float it. Parse float, and since I don't want a lot of decimal places, I actually just want the first threes. Okay, that's not too bad. So say .toFix. Okay, last but not least, set balance to formatted balance. Awesome, and that should be a good use effect. Okay, let me just double check if there's anything here I need. No, looks pretty good. Cool. All right, so let's set up the rest of our functions now. So coming above connect wallet, let's make a function called the contract address. Get contract address. Okay, the get contract address is exactly what it sounds like, and depending on what coin I select, it should grab the corresponding ABI and the corresponding address. So if I get Bitcoin, I should get Bitcoin. And again, it's not going to work because we haven't set it up. But like I said, we can just express that using conditions. So if I say if coin select equals something like BTC, we should get Bitcoin address. Simple enough. So what you could do is simply just copy that and restructure it. Cool. So we should have 4 BTC. We also have Doge, return Doge address. Okay, if any of these are misspelled or typed wrong, it's going to cause some issues. So if I say Sol, say Solana address. And this one, if I say USDC address. All right, yeah, so it should return whatever we typed here. Notice how it's not grayed out. We're actually using it. Awesome. Okay, after that, I wanted to explain that I'm going to make another drop down here. So there should be one drop down, right? This is going to be the coin or token that I want to change. And then there's going to be a second drop down under here, which is going to be the token that I just want to swap to. So if I were to show that, I'd go over to the buy tokens component, and you see where it says select here. All right, we can actually just copy that. All right, copy from the opening select to the closing select, and in the next line, literally just paste it in there. So there should be 2. And here you can actually erase that ETH option. So we have BTC, Doge, Sol, USDC, and this one should have BTC, ETH, Doge, Sol, and USD. Okay, so save. And if you look, there we go. There should be 2 here. This is going to be the coin select. It's going to be tracked with the coin select state, and this one's going to be tracked with 2 coin. So what we're going to need is a function that also gets the to address, right? Because we have a function for get address. So going back to our context, let's make a const get to address. All right, this is going to do the functionality wise. It's going to do the same thing. All right, which is going to be, depending on the coin select, get those addresses. Okay. One thing we're missing is we need a const get to ABI, which is going to get the ABI of the coin that I want to get from. So this one, okay? Equals arrow, boom. And this should be the same thing, right? If coin select, all right? And if, remember, this is to get to address. This should actually be to coin. Now that I'm seeing, boom, 1 second. Yeah, these shouldn't say coin select. It should actually say to coin, right? We're going to use that state that we're keeping track of right here. And in the get to ABI, it should be the same thing. If the to coin is any of these, we should be the addresses. Boom. Oops. So you can actually fix this really quickly by highlighting address, pressing Command D or Control D, and then just moving your cursor like, and I can just erase all of it. Cool. So that didn't fix all of them, but we can fix. Let me try that again. So there's a quick way to fix this. What you can do is highlight address and press Control D or Command D. Press backspace to erase all the addresses that you highlighted, and I can just switch all of them to ABI, and we're good to go. Hey, and we're actually using all the imports. Amazing. Cool. Yeah, so these are our helper functions that we're gonna need for our mint function. So let's actually work on that mint function now. So coming down below here, I wanna say const mint equals async function. All right, and if you're confused right now, the mint function is going to run, right, when I press oops. And if you're confused at all, the mint function is going to run when I press send, because the idea is if I want Ethereum, it's not going to work. But the idea is if I want to switch my Doge for Bitcoin, I should be able to send my Doge coins to the Bitcoin contract and then mint those Bitcoin, send them over to me, okay? So in this mint function, whenever we do asynchronous functions, we usually have a try catch here that I'll set up now. It's gonna say error, boom. And in the catch, we can just have console error and say error.message. That's it for the catch. The most important part of this is going to be that try block. So coming down to the mint function, if the coin select equal to Ethereum, right? Because if you remember how our app works, we are using Ethereum to get these tokens, right? We don't have this right away. We have to use Ethereum and pay with the smart contract to get these tokens minted. From there, once I do have Doge, for example, I can trade that for any of Sol tokens, right? Then it becomes like a whole token exchange. All right, so we can do, that's why I also have ETH here instead of here, because we can't swap our tokens for ETH at the moment, okay? Cool. So if the coin select is ETH, right? I don't want to swap tokens. I actually just want to send Ethereum to that contract so I can get tokens. So the first thing I'll do is have another if statement. If is authenticated, if not is authenticated, return, and that's it. This is just checking if the user is not logged in. We shouldn't be able to run the mint function. So that's the edge case there. Next thing we can do is have an await for Moralis.enable web. Sure, we enable web3. And then we can say the contract address, right? The contract address of what we want is going to be equal to whatever get contract address gets. Let me try that again. All right, after you do Moralis.enable web3, the next thing you want to do is create a variable here and call it contract address, because in this variable, it's going to be equal to get to address. So depending on what's selected here, it's going to get that contract. So that would be saying if this was Ethereum, I'm going to be getting Doge with that. All right, so that's why we're setting it equal to get to address. And I probably should spell this right, get contract address. And after that, we should also get the ABI, const ABI is going to be equal to get to ABI. All right, because again, if the second option selected is Doge, we should get Doge's contract address and Doge's ABI. Make some space here. I want to make a variable called options. And this is going to be important because this is what I'm going to be passing in. Okay, so I'm going to be making a variable called options, set it equal to an object because we're going to be passing in all of these things here. So contract address is just going to be set to contract address. And the function name is actually going to be mint. Okay, and the ABI will be the ABI. And the params here, you can say to is going to be the current account. And the amount, you set it to Moralis units.token, we say 50. Cool. All right. That's the param. All right, afterwards, underneath here in line 101, after the options object, we can run a function called send ETH, not that, send ETH. And this doesn't exist yet, but we're gonna make it much later. And that's how we're gonna send money over. Okay, next thing we wanna do const transaction, no S, equals await Moralis.execute function. And this is where we pass in the options. Okay, next we'll have a receipt here equal to wait transaction.wait for, oops, this should say constant. All right, and then lastly, we're gonna have a save transaction function. And again, this doesn't exist yet either, but it's gonna make use of our API route. And you wanna pass in receipt.transaction hash, the amount and the receipt to. Cool, and that's just the if statement. The next thing is if coin select isn't Ethereum, then we're doing a regular token to token, which means we should run the swap tokens function, which we have to make ourselves later on, and also run the save transaction. And it's pretty much the same thing. You do receipt transaction hash, the amount and receipt. Cool. So notice how we have a couple of helper functions we still have to make. So let's work on that now. Okay, coming down here, in between connect wallet and the mint function, I'm gonna make another one called const swap tokens. So like I said, if the coin select is not Ethereum, we should just do a token to token swap. So what we'll have here is actually make this asynchronous and then try catch. It's gonna be error console.error error message. Awesome. All right, cool. Now working on the try block, if, again, check if they're authenticated, return. Our edge case is done. Now we can just do, first thing we want to do is await Moralis.enable web3. After you enable web3, the next thing you want to do is have another edge case here. If the coin select is equal to the coin, right? If both drop downs equal each other like it does, nothing should happen. We shouldn't be able to swap tokens with the same tokens, like the same thing, right? So here's that edge case. If coin select is equal to 2 coin, you also just want to return. Nothing should happen. All right, so then the last thing that could possibly happen is if the coin select doesn't equal 2coin, which means we're just doing the swap. So we can just say const from options, right? This is similar to what we're doing with the mint function. Mint function, we want to make an options object. This one's going to be the options object for the from. So we can say type ERC20 is going to be a Moralis units token, the amount, and 18. All right, this amount is going to be the state that's passed in, which is coming from whatever number we put in the amount input field. Okay, cool. Then we have to put in the receiver. So if I say receiver, that's going to be the get contract address, and the contract address is going to be get contract. Cool. All right, so then we need the const to mint options, right? Because you should look at it like this. If I have, for example, Solana, it's going to be broken. But if I had Solana to Doge, I'm going to send my Solana tokens to the Doge contract address and in that contract address, mint new Doge tokens to send to me. That's the goal. So we need these two mint options where you say contract address is the get to address. The get to address function name should just be mint because we're running the mint function of that. And the ABI of this contract is going to be the same as the get to ABI. And the params is just going to be the current account. That's who we're sending these tokens to. And the amount of tokens is going to be the amount we passed in. So that's going to be units again, that token amount. Cool. So we got the from options and we got two mint options. Next we need a couple variables here, which is from transaction equals await Moralis.transfer, and then pass in from options. Okay, cool. Is that we also need to store the mint transaction and do an await Moralis.execute function and pass the to mint option. Okay, and then now we need to store the receipt. So if I do the from receipt, set it equal to await from transaction, and actually do a dot wait. On a really high level, the dot wait is basically an await, but for the blockchain. Right, I want to wait for it to finish and also wait for it over here. Okay, also do the same thing for the to receipt, to mint transaction. All right, and then we can also console log the from receipt and the to receipt just to see it. Okay, cool. So that is the swap tokens. All right, there's a couple more we need to make. The next helper function I want to make, it's called the send, also asynchronous. Cool. So usual suspects here. If not authenticated, just rip. And then const contract address equals the get to address, right? Because when we're sending ETH, the only address that we care about is the address that I want to get tokens of. So if I'm using ETH, I'm going to get Doge coins if I select Doge. So I need the to address here, set up our options again, and type is going to be native, and the amount. This actually controls the amount of ETH I'm sending for each token. And basically each transaction, every token is going to cost, every time I make a transaction to mint these tokens, it's just going to cost 0.01 ETH. You can change this value to whatever you want. For the sake of doing this over and over again, I make it really cheap so I can do multiple tests. So I'll make an amount to 0.01 ETH to as the price to mint these tokens. And then we could do a receiver. It's just going to be the contract address. Okay, next is a const transaction. Save that transaction with a Moralis.transfer options. Yep, pass it in there in the transaction variable, ETH variable. And of course, we also have to run save transaction. Okay, all right, so that's the send ETH function. Last helper function we need to make is the save transaction function. Yep, this is going to be calling our API route. So let's make it asynchronous. All right, we actually don't need to try catch actually. What I'll do for this one is the first thing I'm going to write is an await, and it should call our API route, which is just API/swap, I believe. Yep, you can add a comma here and pass in a couple of things. All right, a couple things we need to write is what's our method. It should be post because I'm adding a transaction document to Sanity. Headers. All right, content type. This one's pretty standard. Content type is :application/JSON. So that's the headers. Then there's a body key, which we can, oops, not that. Should be an object. Should be body. Then we want a JSON.stringify. And what we want to stringify is this object. So tx hash is going to be just tx hash. And then from is going to be current account. To is going to be to address. Nope. And amount is going to be parse float. And all right, and if you remember, when we call save transaction, it takes in a couple parameters. So we have to define those parameters. So this is going to be the tx hash, the amount, and who we're sending to. Yep, and that's all the things we're going to fill out here in the box. Cool. All right, cool. So after that's pretty much everything in the context that we need. The next thing we have to do is make sure you go into value here and pass it in as value, because that's going to make it global to the rest of our account of our app. So I'm just going to say set amount mint. We need the set coin select. We we need the coin select balance, swap tokens, amount, 2 coin, and 2 coin. Awesome. So add all of those variables into value to make it global throughout our app. And at this point, everything should be glowing. Amazing. Cool. There's not much left, guys. There's actually almost done with our app. So let's move on to the next part. All right, so after you add all these variables, we're actually almost done, guys. So if you made it this far into the video, comment down below something like gorilla. So if I see a gorilla in the comments, I know that you guys watched the whole way through and you made it this far. Okay, so let's see how many comments we get. If I don't see any, then I know you guys are not really watching this. So let's crush these builds. Next thing is let's head over to pages and go to your index. If you remember, in your index, we have something called the assets. And I'm gonna bring up the browser page again, and it looks something like this. So this right here is our assets component. Right now, we have about 4 static. These actually should be a little bit more dynamic in the sense that I wanna get the top 15 coins and show a little nice graph on them. All right, we do that by making an API call to coin ranking. And we got that through Rapid API. So the first things you want to do is end your terminal real quick and just do a yarn add Axios to make this call. Okay, and while that's installing, head over to Google and then you can do coin ranking Rapid API. Okay, it's going to be loading. It's going to ask you to log in. And once you log in, you should be able to see your API key. And we're basically going to use all of this to get the coin rankings. Okay, all right, looks like Axios is done. Okay, it looks like Axios is done. And the next thing you want to do is go to your .env file and let's add another variable called coin ranking host. Set that equal to whatever is up here. You don't need the quotes, you can just get the coin ranking stuff. So this is your host. Then we can do a coin underscore ranking and key. Set that equal to this whole key right here. And again, you're not going to see this key until you sign up. So go ahead and do that. Put it into your environment variables, hit save. And yarn dev again in your terminal so we can load that .env, see loaded env file. Okay, and then what you want to do next is hop over to your index.js. We're going to use get static props for this. So notice how in the host, I'm calling the environment variables host and key. And then the important part that you need to know is this return props and then destructure coins. If you're familiar with destructuring props, it's working the same way. I can come up to home right here, say coins, and console log coins, and you should see what we're getting back from the API call. Okay, cool. And another important note is come below here in line 12 for me, and let's import Axios from Axios. Okay, so I'm gonna hit save and hit refresh. And we should see about 50. Yep, and we actually don't need this many coins. That would be a lot of assets for our app. I only need 15. So while we're here at the top, let's do another import and import use state. And while we're here, let's get use context as well. Okay, cool. So once that's done, we can also import our Robinhood context. So come below down here and let's set up that state. This, say my coins, and notice how I'm not using my coins because I know I'm not gonna need to update my state. This is the only time I'm gonna do that. And the initial state actually is gonna be an array, which uses the spreader operator to slice it and only get the first 15. So then, oops. So if you do that, and then on the next, if I could get to the next line, hold on, I could do it. Then on the next line, we can console log my coins to see what we get back. Oh, it should be coins, inspect, and you can see that we actually got 15 coins. I'll refresh this so it looks a little bit cleaner. Boom, 15. We can use that. And that's what we want for this sidebar here. So you remember how it works. It's using the static assets. Let's map through my coins instead. So my coins.map. And for every coin in my coins, I want to set up a couple things. So it's gonna look like this. Let price equals the parse float of the coin.price. It's gonna grab the price value, parse float it, set it to price, because what I can do from there is do a price.toFixed, right? Because it's gonna be some sort of decimal that I want to be reduced to 2 decimal places. And then we can return an assets. And the key of this, we can actually use the UUID. The coin will be exactly the same as, and the price will be the same as the price that I just formatted. So hit save, bam, look at that. Doesn't that look nice, guys? All right, this is feeling a lot more like Robinhood, right? We get the different kinds of graphs, the red or the green, depending on if it's over or under. Amazing, cool. So now that we have all these assets here, the next thing I'm looking at is, if you look, it says 23 ETH. This is supposed to represent how much Ethereum I have in my portfolio. And I wish I had 23 ETH, but that's not the truth. So let's fix that. We can do this by coming down below. Remember how we imported context? We can actually pull from our context and say, let's get the balance from our Robinhood context. And this is how we can do it. Now that we have the balance variable, we can insert that wherever we need. So go to where it says 23 and I'll just insert balance there. And if I hit save, I'm logged in, bam, that's how much ETH I have. We're good to go. Awesome. All right, and now the only thing is left to do is let's set up the swap tokens feature. You ready? All right, guys, we are at the finish line now. And I'm gonna head over to buytokens.js. And the very first thing I'm gonna do is let's get our context in here. So curly brackets, use context. And whenever we do that, we also need the context that we want to use, which is Robinhood. From here, let's take the variables that we'll need, which is gonna be const. And I'm gonna take a couple on this one. So we can just do equals use context. All right, so the ones that we're gonna take from this is authenticated, set amount, mint, set coin select to coin, I believe. Oh, and of course, set to coin. Okay, might not need coin and set to coin. One sec. Yep, so this makes sense. Coin select. This actually, anytime it says to coin here, this actually should be to coin. Yeah, so this should be to coin, and this should be set to. Yep, and this one should be coin select and set coin select. This should be coin set to coin. Now we're using everything. Looks good. Okay. All right. So now that we have all of that, I had a bunch of like state variables or default variables here. We can take that out. Now that we're actually importing all that stuff, hit save. You should get no errors because we're pulling those variables. And I want to double check something in my smart contract folder, in my scripts deploy. Make sure that all of this is correct. We deployed our contract. It has the right names. Like I'm saying Bitcoin, Solana, USDC, getting the right ones, USDC, Solana, BTC. And it's going to be based on what you put here. Construct Solana, construct Dogecoin, construct USDC, and so forth. Cool. So that looks fine. The next thing I'm worried about is probably just in our Robinhood context. Okay. All right. I guess the only thing left to do is just to test it. Can we switch to ETH? Yep. No errors. Can I switch to USDC? Awesome. Cool. Let's just run the function. So if you look in our MetaMask currently, this is how much ETH I have. And if you look at my assets, we don't see any of the tokens. But if you do want to see the tokens, you need to import them. So let me show you how to do that. So remember our constants folder in our lib folder. All right. This is why I told you to save all the contract addresses. So open it up. So let's say I pull this contract address, copy, import tokens. If you paste that contract address, notice how it already takes up the symbol and the token decimal, right? Isn't that awesome? So if I import tokens, I should have 0 Doge because I actually do have 0 Doge with this wallet. Next, let's get our Bitcoin token, and I'm just gonna make this bigger. It's easier. So now our goal, like I said, we're getting tokens by sending Ethereum to them first. That's the first exchange. And then once we get the tokens, we can simulate a DEX by swapping token to token. So let's do it this way. I'm gonna do Ethereum and select some Solana. So I'm gonna give this a try. So Ethereum to Solana, let's say 50, and here goes nothing. I press send. Oh, okay, cool. So the first issue that I have there, I'm gonna hit reject because that shouldn't refresh. So you saw that refresh, that means every time I press send or submit, the form is reloading the page. You never want that. What we should do is go to buy tokens. And I think I know what the issue is. Yeah, so the type equals submit here. You could say type equals but, and that should prevent the refresh. So I want to go to ETH to Solana, send 50, press send. There we go. So no refresh happened. I can make this bigger now. Yeah, and we should have two. The first one, if you see a mint here, that's a good sign. So let's hit confirm. All right, and then this is a contract interaction, which is also a good sign. And since we're talking to the blockchain, it's gonna take a couple minutes to get it. Ooh, 15 transactions. Yeah, it's definitely not 15 transactions that we just did. Let's take a look. Hey, look at that, we got Solana, boys. So now that we got Solana, we can ask ourselves, what if we want to take some of our Solana and exchange it for Bitcoin? All right, so let's change it to Sol, BTC, and let's just send something weird like 13. Let's see if that's possible. Okay, oh, look at that transfer. That's good. 13 Sol, confirm. And then the mint, that's also good because like I said, when I transfer Solana, I need to mint 13 Bitcoin tokens. Okay, transactions confirmed. Oh snap, there it is. There's our exchange, guys. Look at that, more transactions confirmed. But with that, everything will work. You can get your Bitcoin, get USDC, you can get your USDC traded in for Sol, and that's it. That's the Robinhood app. Okay, all that's left to do now is let's deploy this onto Netlify. All right, wasn't this awesome? Leave a comment down below if you were able to finish it. If you love learning about Solidity and how to exchange tokens, it's only going to get more in depth from here at Clever Programmer. So be on the lookout for those videos. Let's go on to the next step and deploy this to Netlify. All right, with that said, that's the app, guys. That's it. So now that's done, the only thing that's left to do is let's deploy our app using Netlify. If you're not familiar, Netlify is an amazing website that makes it so simple to take your builds and apply and deploy it online so that you can send it to your friends, show your family this really cool thing that you made. So let's do that. Go to add new site and let's import an existing project. What's gonna make Netlify super awesome is that we can use our GitHub to deploy our projects. All right, so for me, I'm gonna use my Clever Programmers and account, and I wanna get that Robinhood clone that we worked on. Yep, cool. Let's do build command should be yarn run build, and let's deploy site, okay? When you're deploying your site, one thing I'm realizing is we actually should set up our environment variables here. So when you say edit variables, what you wanna do is set that up. So the only thing that's going to give us a problem is the API calls. So to do that, I'm going to do coin ranking host. And for that, you need to put in the host, which is just going to be this. Where'd it go? Paste. Yep. New variable coin ranking underscore key. It's going to be the key. Cool. And let's hit save. All right. Now that it's done, yeah, this is what I want. We're going to see the deploy logs and just wait for this to run. Ooh, Netlify build complete. Okay. I'm scrolling to the top. Publish, deployed, click on this website, and we're in. Let's go, it's up. Awesome, look at this. Our website is up and running. And let's say this link right here is the one that you can actually send and people will see this exact page. So make sure you deploy your app. And if you don't like the name, we can actually change it. That's another amazing thing about Netlify. I can go to site overview, review, go to site settings, site details, change site name, and let's name it. We can say Robinhood Clone Blockchain. And if I hit save, as long as the name is not taken, now when you type in this website URL, this is what you're gonna see. You're gonna see my Robinhood clone. So be sure to use Netlify, take advantage of it, and send us your links. Put this in your portfolio, show it to your coworkers, your friends, and they'll be pretty impressed that you can exchange. So that's going to be it for today's video. Be sure to keep on the lookout for our upcoming Web3 Solidity tutorials, and we might be doing some videos on Solana as well. So be on the lookout for that, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace!